Cadet 13 had always prided themselves on being unpredictable, a storm in a hall of routine. Instructors hated them, fellow cadets feared them, and explosions seemed to follow wherever they went. They moved through the training hall with a predatory precision, all angles and twitching muscles, until that day. That day when everything changed with the simple slide of a door. The training hall smelled faintly of burnt metal, ozone, and fear, the lingering remnants of last week's simulation. White light poured from the ceiling panels, harsh and unflinching, highlighting every movement, every slip, every twitch of every cadet's nervous hands. Cadet 13 was pacing near the obstacle course, running through the day's drills in their mind, when a low whir of machinery cut through the usual hum of activity. The doors slid open, sharp and deliberate, and Cadet 13 stopped mid-stride. The hall felt smaller all of a sudden, tighter, suffocating. A human entered, not the kind who shouted orders, not the kind who wielded authority in the traditional sense, but a human who exuded an almost imperceptible dominance, like the eye of a storm calm yet utterly unstoppable. She walked slowly, deliberately, carrying a small cage pressed to her chest. Cadet 13 instinctively crouched slightly, not out of humility, but out of instinct. This was the first unknown variable they couldn't measure, predict, or control. The cadets around her whispered, their voices trailing off as they stared at the tiny furred bundle inside. It was a hamster. Cadet 13 froze. A hamster. That was all. Yet the energy in the room changed as though someone had flipped a switch. Every cadet's eyes followed her, every muscle tense, every instinct screaming that this small creature was a force to be reckoned with. Cadet 13's chest tightened, and an unfamiliar sensation of unease snaked through their body. Lieutenant Harris, the grizzled veteran with years of exasperated authority, stepped forward, voice booming but tinged with amusement. "Cadets, meet our new specialist, Emily Carter. She'll be evaluating your performance and, apparently, providing morale support." Emily didn't nod or smile in the traditional sense. She merely set the cage on the floor, letting the hamster scurry out. Its tiny paws barely made a sound on the polished hall floor, but its gaze was sharp, precise, and entirely unsettling. It looked at Cadet 13 and froze, not for a second, not as a reflex, but with an intensity that made the air itself seem heavier. Cadet 13's instincts went haywire. They had survived zero-gravity drills, flamethrower simulations, and hand-to-hand combat tests. But this? This tiny creature radiated an authority that no one else possessed. It squeaked, almost deliberately, as if articulating its intent. Cadet 13 took a step back and found themselves suddenly aware of every twitch in their limbs, every shallow intake of breath, every spike of panic racing through their veins. "Meet Hammy," Emily said softly, crouching to the creature's level. Her voice had a musical lilt that seemed incongruous with the sterile, mechanical hall. "He's very good at reading people. Keeps me on my toes. You might want to behave." Cadet 13's ears twitched involuntarily. They had never been the one watched, not truly. The scrutiny of instructors had always felt mechanical, impersonal. But Hammy's gaze was personal. It weighed them, calculated, dissected, and found fault in ways Cadet 13 had never imagined. The day continued in a blur. Cadet 13 tried to ignore the hamster, telling themselves it was just a rodent, a minor distraction, a non-threat. But everywhere they turned, it appeared, on the edge of the obstacle course, darting across the simulation floor, squeaking when Cadet 13's movements faltered. The creature's presence became a constant, insidious whisper in the back of their mind. By mid-morning, Cadet 13 found their precision faltering. They tripped over a calibration panel, misjudged distances, and failed to clear hurdles they had once dominated effortlessly. Each misstep felt like a betrayal, a humiliation that gnawed at their pride. Other cadets watched in quiet satisfaction. Some snickered. One even whispered, "It's just a hamster, and you're afraid of it." Cadet 13's mind recoiled. "It's not just a hamster," they told themselves. It's a mirror." Every squeak, every movement, every tiny paw tapping the floor reflected their own fears, their own insecurities. The hamster was not merely observing, they were judging, daring Cadet 13 to rise, or crumble. Then came the critical moment during the agility drill. Cadet 13 had always excelled here. They leaped, twisted, and vaulted with the precision of a well-oiled machine. And then, for the first time, something external disrupted them. Hammy appeared at the edge of the course, squeaking sharply as though marking a boundary Cadet 13 could not cross. They froze mid-air, chest tight, mind racing. Their usual instincts failed. The landing was off, the balance skewed. A crash into the padded wall followed, sending a shockwave of humiliation rippling through the hall. Laughter erupted. Lieutenant Harris shook his head, muttering under his breath. Cadet 13 felt the sting of shame like fire against their skin. Emily crouched beside the fallen cadet. Hammy climbed onto her shoulder, whiskers twitching in rhythmic cadence with her calm, almost imperceptible breathing. "See," she said gently, almost mockingly. "He knows when you need a little perspective." Cadet 13's jaw clenched. Humiliation, confusion, fear all tangled into a knot that refused to unravel. "It's a hamster." "Nothing more," they whispered, though their trembling hands betrayed the lie. Lunch brought no relief. Cadet 13 tried to eat, tried to focus on the bland rations, but every squeak from Hammy, every glance from the tiny black eyes, drew their attention back. They were obsessively aware of the smallest details: how Hammy twitched its nose when it sniffed the air, how it darted toward the corners of the hall before retreating, how it seemed to anticipate every movement with uncanny precision. By evening, Cadet 13 lay on their bunk, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. Every squeak, every twitch of Hammy's tiny paws was etched into their mind. Sleep eluded them. They muttered over and over, "It's just a hamster. Just a hamster." But even as they said it, they knew it wasn't true. Something in Hammy had touched a nerve, and Cadet 13 realized something terrifying. For the first time in their life, they had been outmaneuvered without force, without skill, without combat. The lights dimmed. Shadows stretched across the bunkroom, elongated and strange, twisting in ways that mimicked Cadet 13's restless thoughts. Outside, the faint hum of machinery continued, indifferent. And somewhere, across the hall, a tiny squeak echoed, sharp and deliberate, like a reminder that the world had shifted. Cadet 13 sat up, eyes wide in the half-darkness, and whispered to themselves, a mix of awe and dread, Who is this hamster?" For the first time in their existence, Cadet 13 understood fear not as a weakness, not as a momentary shiver, but as a force, a teacher, an entity that could unseat even the most formidable. And tomorrow, they would face it again. Because the human had arrived. And Hammy. Hammy was everywhere. Cadet 13 had spent the night tossing and turning, replaying every squeak, every twitch, every impossibly piercing glance from Hammy. By morning, they were exhausted, muscles tight, mind frayed, yet the day demanded performance. The training hall awaited, indifferent to their fear. And as always, the white lights burned down, exposing every shadow, every flaw, every twitch in their body. Emily Carter arrived as usual, calm and precise, her hair pulled back neatly, her jumpsuit immaculate. In her hands, she carried Hammy, who peered from the cage with tiny, black, observant eyes that seemed to pierce Cadet 13's very thoughts. For a moment, Cadet 13 froze at the threshold, heart hammering. The hamster's tiny whiskers twitched like antennae picking up the chaos within them. Cadet 13 tried to steady their breathing. "It's just a hamster. Just a rodent. You've faced worse." And yet, instinct screamed something entirely different. The day's exercises began in the usual sequence: agility drills, target practice, coordination challenges. But from the first moment, Cadet 13 noticed subtle shifts in the environment. Hammy wasn't merely present, it was precise, deliberate, almost strategic. It would dart ahead of Cadet 13's path, squeaking sharply at the most inconvenient moments, forcing stumbles. It would pause at obstacles, sniffing the air, staring directly at them with eyes that seemed almost knowing. The other cadets noticed the change, too. A few whispered, some laughed nervously, but Emily Carter said nothing. She simply observed, her expression serene, as though she were watching a storm unfold and waiting for the first crack of lightning. Cadet 13's panic intensified. Their usual confidence had eroded into something brittle and unstable. Each movement felt weighted, every leap and pivot scrutinized by unseen eyes. Even when the instructors shouted corrections, Cadet 13 could barely focus. Hammy's presence created a strange, psychological pressure that no simulation had ever achieved. During a mid-morning coordination drill, Cadet 13 approached a balance beam spanning a simulated canyon. They leapt, landing on the narrow surface, only to freeze mid-step. Hammy had appeared at the far end, squeaking as though daring them forward. Cadet 13's chest constricted, mind racing. One misstep could spell disaster, not just in the exercise, but in their pride. They tried to ignore it, shaking their head violently, forcing their feet to move. But every squeak, every tiny paw tap against the floor echoed in their mind like an alarm. Cadet 13's usual fluidity disintegrated, leaving them stiff, jerky, twitching in all the wrong ways. Fellow cadets gasped or muttered under their breath, but no one stepped in. Not Emily, not the instructors. This was a personal trial, one Cadet 13 could not cheat, could not fight, could not ignore. By noon, Cadet 13's nerves were taut, a coiled spring ready to snap. Even routine tasks, a series of timed levers and switches, became almost impossible. Every time they reached for a panel, Hammy would squeak, darting along the edge of the console with perfect timing to make their hand tremble. Cadet 13's movements faltered, sparks occasionally flying from misaligned circuits. Their frustration mounted, boiling into raw panic that threatened to erupt. Cadet 13 could feel it, the slow, creeping sensation that they were being toyed with. Hammy didn't need to attack, didn't need to bite or strike. Every twitch, every squeak, every blink was a psychological push, a pressure point drilled into Cadet 13's mind. Fear wasn't simply present, it was alive, personalized, precise. Then came the live simulation, the final test of the day. Cadet 13 entered the chamber, expecting chaos as usual. Hostiles, obstacles, time constraints, they had faced all of it before. But Hammy was there, too, waiting at the entrance, eyes gleaming like liquid onyx. Cadet 13's stomach twisted. They could not shake the feeling that the hamster knew exactly how far they would push, exactly how to exploit the tiniest crack in their composure. The timer started. Cadet 13 lunged forward, adrenaline surging. For the first few seconds, they moved flawlessly, clearing the first set of obstacles with practiced skill. But then a squeak, a single, high-pitched note, halted them. Their foot slipped on the next platform. Their arm flailed, grabbing air, and they nearly tumbled into the pit below. Heart racing, they forced themselves forward, only to find Hammy already waiting at the next hurdle, squeaking sharply again, ears twitching. Cadet 13 froze mid-leap, every instinct screaming retreat. Their mind split into competing commands: move, don't move, jump, stay. Sweat poured down their spine. The other cadets watched in tense silence, unsure whether to intervene. Lieutenant Harris muttered something incomprehensible, probably to himself. Emily Carter's calm voice finally cut through the chaos over the comms. Focus. Trust yourself. Don't let him rattle you. Cadet 13's stomach lurched. Him? The hamster had a pronoun. A presence. A will. Cadet 13's teeth clenched, muscles taut, mind fraying. It was no longer simply a simulation, they were in a duel with an entity they could not understand, an adversary that required no weapons, only precision, cunning, and observation. Minutes or maybe seconds, Cadet 13 couldn't tell, passed in agonizing slow motion. Every obstacle became a potential failure. Every squeak was amplified in their ears. And then, near the end of the course, a miscalculated jump sent Cadet 13 crashing into a containment chamber. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the sound of scrambling feet filled the hall. Cadet 13 collapsed against the padded wall, chest heaving, skin hot and clammy. Hammy appeared almost immediately, perched calmly on Emily's hand, whiskers twitching, black eyes glinting. Cadet 13 stared in disbelief. The hamster hadn't moved during the chaos, hadn't made a sound, yet had guided them, or rather, forced them into failure with uncanny precision. Emily crouched beside the chamber, her expression serene, almost maternal, almost mocking. You see, she said softly. He knows when you need a little perspective. Cadet 13's jaw tightened. Humiliation, confusion, and panic tangled into a knot that refused to untangle. They had faced combat drills that mimicked ambushes, zero-gravity malfunctions, and flamethrower hazards. they had survived it all. But a tiny hamster, no larger than a fist, had stripped away all their control, exposed their fear, and left them raw and vulnerable. Hours later, back in the bunkroom, Cadet 13 lay on their bed, staring at the ceiling in the dim light. The events of the day played on loop: the squeak of Hammy's wheel, the tilt of its head, the calm, piercing stare from Emily Carter. "It's just a hamster," they repeated, voice low, trembling. But the truth gnawed at the edges of their mind. The hamster was no longer just a creature. It was a force. It was a teacher. It was something that could manipulate without touch, dominate without violence, and reveal weakness without confrontation. Cadet 13 felt something unfamiliar, awe. And beneath it, something darker, fear. Sleep eluded them. Shadows stretched long and strange across the walls. Every squeak from a distant corner of the hall, every whisper of machinery, felt amplified. Cadet 13 realized that the training hall would never feel the same. They had been broken down, stripped bare, and rebuilt in a new shape dictated by an unlikely adversary. And tomorrow, they would face the hamster again. Not with weapons, not with skill, not with aggression. But with something new: understanding. Because in this hall, in this cycle of fear and discipline, Cadet 13 was learning that the smallest things often held the greatest power. And the smallest thing of all, Hammy, was just getting started. Cadet 13 had survived the night, but sleep had been fleeting, broken by the echoes of squeaks and the unrelenting rhythm of their own heartbeat. By morning, the weight of exhaustion pressed down like a physical force, yet the training hall awaited, cold and sterile, indifferent to human or cadet fear. Emily Carter arrived punctually, as always. In her hands, Hammy rode like a miniature king on a velvet throne, black eyes glinting with uncanny intelligence. Cadet 13 froze at the doorway. For a moment, all the bravado that had carried them through simulations and chaos seemed to vanish, leaving only a raw, exposed awareness. The hall smelled of ozone, polished metal, and the faint tang of nerves. Shadows stretched long across the floor, curling around the obstacles and equipment, as if observing the cadet just as intently as the hamster did. Every muscle in Cadet 13's body twitched with anticipation, every sense alert, every instinct screaming to retreat, to hide, to fight, but not physically. Not yet. Emily crouched, allowing Hammy to scamper onto the floor. The hamster's tiny paws made almost no sound, but its presence was absolute. Cadet 13's chest tightened instinctively. For weeks, Hammy had been an omnipresent judge, a predator of the mind, a silent orchestrator of panic and precision. And now, here it was again, watching. Waiting. The day's exercises began with the agility course. Cadet 13 approached the first platform, muscles tense. For a fleeting moment, they considered avoiding the course entirely, retreating into the corner of the hall where they could hide. But the memory of failure and of humiliation propelled them forward. Hammy darted ahead, squeaking sharply, whiskers twitching. Cadet 13 froze, every fiber of their body screaming panic. But then, somewhere deep within, a thought broke through: fear is a tool. They exhaled slowly, forcing their trembling limbs to respond. Every step, every leap became deliberate, measured, aware of the hamster's gaze but not dominated by it. The other cadets watched in tense silence. Emily Carter observed quietly from the sidelines, serene as ever, allowing the small hamster to do what it had always done: guide, challenge, provoke. But this time, Cadet 13 met the gaze, not with defiance, not with terror, but with understanding. Hammy squeaked again as Cadet 13 approached a narrow beam over simulated lava. Their feet wobbled slightly, a reflexive twitch born of months of panic, but instead of freezing, Cadet 13 adjusted mid-step. They felt the hamster's presence like a physical weight, a test of focus. And for the first time, they did not falter. Minutes stretched like hours. Every obstacle, every hurdle, every challenge demanded precision, awareness, and patience. And Cadet 13 moved with a rhythm they had never known, attuned not just to their own body, but to the subtle cues of Hammy. The tiny creature, once a source of terror, became a mirror, reflecting Cadet 13's growing discipline, adaptability, and understanding. By midday, something remarkable happened. Cadet 13 began to anticipate Hammy's movements. The squeaks no longer startled them, they became signals, guides, almost like spoken instructions in a language they were learning to understand. Cadet 13 adjusted, adapted, and moved in harmony with the tiny observer. They were no longer reacting, they were collaborating, unconsciously, with a creature that had once seemed omnipotent. During the live simulation, the final test of the day, Cadet 13 entered the chamber with a quiet determination. Hammy sat at the entrance, whiskers twitching, eyes reflecting every nervous impulse. Cadet 13's heartbeat steadied. They moved through the obstacles with fluid precision, clearing them in perfect sequence, every leap and twist a demonstration of focus tempered by humility. When they reached the final chamber, Hammy was already there, perched on Emily's shoulder. The hamster tilted its head, studying Cadet 13 with the same unflinching intensity. But Cadet 13 no longer felt fear. Instead, they felt gratitude, awe, and a strange sense of kinship. They had been tested, broken down, and rebuilt not by instructors, not by drills, not by fire or gravity, but by a tiny creature with a subtle, unyielding command of perception. Emily crouched beside them, Hammy clambering onto her hand. Her expression was soft, almost proud. "You've done well, Cadet 13. Fear is a teacher," she said, voice calm, almost musical. "And you've learned its lessons." Cadet 13 nodded slowly, chest rising and falling, mind still racing yet finally at peace. I understand," they admitted, voice low, almost reverent. "Not just about fear, but about control, awareness, and respect." The hamster squeaked softly, climbing onto Cadet 13's shoulder. Cadet 13 froze for a moment, but then, with careful patience, they allowed the tiny creature to settle there. Its weight was negligible, but the symbolism was immense. The predator of their mind had become a companion, a reminder of what mastery truly required: humility, observation, and acceptance of forces greater than oneself. The other cadets watched, some in disbelief, some in awe. They had expected Cadet 13 to fail, to lash out, or to be consumed by panic. Instead, they had witnessed a transformation. Cadet 13, once reckless and untouchable, had become disciplined, aware, and profoundly changed. By evening, the training hall felt different. Shadows stretched across the polished floors, but no longer oppressive. The hum of machinery was steady, predictable, almost soothing. Cadet 13 walked among their peers with a quiet confidence, eyes flicking to Hammy, now seemingly harmless but eternally potent in memory. Lieutenant Harris approached, hands clasped behind his back. "Remarkable work today, 13, he said gruffly. "Not just on the course, but with yourself." Cadet 13 allowed a small nod, the faintest hint of a smile touching their lips. Emily Carter crouched beside them once more. Hammy twitched its whiskers, sniffing the air as if satisfied. "Remember," she said softly, "mastery isn't about defeating what you fear, it's about understanding it, respecting it, and learning from it. You've done that." Cadet 13 swallowed hard, gratitude and disbelief mingling. They had survived not through brute force or skill alone, but through insight, patience, and an unlikely partnership. The hamster, once a source of terror, had become a symbol of growth, subtlety, and the power of perception. And as the cadets filed out, leaving the hall quiet and dim, Cadet 13 lingered for a moment, hand extended to Hammy. The tiny creature leapt onto their palm, whiskers twitching, eyes glimmering. Cadet 13 smiled softly, a quiet, triumphant acknowledgement. "We've both learned something," they thought. "Fear can guide, if you let it." The night settled over the training hall. Lights dimmed, shadows softened, and Cadet 13 felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: peace. They had faced fear, embraced it, and emerged stronger, wiser. The tiniest of teachers, a hamster, had reshaped them, and the human who had brought it had shown them the subtle art of true mastery. For Cadet 13, the hall was no longer a battlefield. It was a place of learning, growth, and quiet respect. And Hammy, perched proudly on their shoulder, was a reminder that sometimes the smallest things wield the greatest power, and that understanding, humility, and courage often come from the most unexpected sources. As they stepped into the dim corridor, Emily Carter called softly from behind, "Good night, Cadet 13. See you tomorrow." Cadet 13 nodded, hand brushing the tiny fur of Hammy. A final squeak, soft and almost approving, echoed through the corridor. And for the first time in their life, Cadet 13 felt entirely ready not just for the next challenge, but for whatever came after. Because they had learned the lesson that no simulation, no drill, and no explosion could teach, mastery was not about control, domination, or fearlessness. It was about respect, awareness, and the courage to face what you feared most, even if that fear came in the form of a tiny hamster. And for Cadet 13, that was enough.